Alright, for today's critical thought, we're going to return to the topic of progression models and how they impact game design. Now, this is a topic that I have talked about many times before, and this is one of those that we can come back to time and time again. And for today, we're going to stick with more of a high level discussion, but like I just said, we can easily drill down for any number of topics in the future. So, to start off with, the progression model for the game is essentially how you chart the player's growth over, again, how many minutes, hours, days, or even sometimes years worth of play. And a good progression model can easily mean the difference between someone sticking with your game for 20 minutes or playing it for several years. And what's very interesting is how I've seen games that fall on both ends of the spectrum. Games that have very simplistic gameplay but are amazing in terms of their progression models, and games that feature very deep game design but the progression model is lacking. Now, a good progression model goes hand in hand with your core gameplay loop, or essentially the main game mechanic or system that's going to drive your game. Now, in the past, we've talked about the forms of progression in game design, and they are action versus abstraction. Action progression or player skill refers to, and I think I mean you come with a catchier title for that in the future, but this refers, as the name implies, the player actually growing in the game. This refers to mastering combos, figuring out the correct timings for enemies, becoming better in terms of aiming in first person. Essentially, these are things that you can see yourself improving on. And it's not easily quantified by the game, which is a major point which we'll come back to in a minute. Now, abstraction refers to the in-game representation of progression. That is elements that aren't directly related to you yourself. So, finding a set piece in Diablo 3, leveling up your character in an MMO, getting a upgraded farm in Farmville, and so on. These are elements that aren't really related to you yourself, but more to what's happening in game. And we've talked about the difference between action versus abstraction in the past. If I'm playing a very challenging action game, it doesn't matter what level my character is if I can't block and counter to save my life. Likewise, if I'm playing a stat-heavy RPG, no matter how fast I hit the buttons or react to what's going on screen, it's not going to mitigate or get rid of RNG or the stats and formulas that are involved. And because of that, this is how progression can be divided between the two. Again, player skill and the in-game abstraction. In games that are built on player skill, the progression model, again, is very limited because there's only so far that you can reasonably expect a player to grow. Not everyone is going to be the pro esports player who's going to hit, top 100 and insert a fighting game here. Because of that, the lifespan of action heavy games, 100% action, can be limited based on the audience that's playing your game. The problem is, without having abstracted elements to essentially be a buffer, it means that the player is the be all and end all for whether or not they're going to progress. Reach a boss or a level that you can't beat, that's it. The game is done. And typically, a lot of people, when they hit that wall, will bounce very hard off of the game. This is where we see many negative reviews for high challenging games like Demon's Souls, Bloodborne, Fury, Super Meat Boy, and the like. Because at the end of the day, you are going to decide whether or not you're going to be able to beat this game. And it can be a very tough pill to swallow when the game basically says, you suck, go away, you're done with the game. Because of that, games that are built on abstracted progression tend to have a longer lifespan or easier to keep the player invested. And the beauty of this is because of how things scale up. And the fact that when it comes to abstracted progression, it's very easy to see it in game. And MMOs, free to play, and idle games are famous for that kind of show principle. Again, we've talked about MMOs in the past with World of Warcraft. You're not going to start off with the uber armor fighting whatever. I don't even know what's considered the high level threat in World of Warcraft. You're going to be stuck wearing just like shorts and a shirt and fighting rats and ghouls. But then as you level up and you grow, things start to scale up. You're going to start finding better gear. You're going to upgrade your skills. You're going to become better and more powerful in the game, and that is easily seen. When it comes to, again, the difference between player skill and abstraction, player skill is very hard for the game to show. You can beat the level, but how do you know that you are better? How do you know that you've trained up? And it's one of those very challenging aspects, especially of the competitive market. How do you know what's the difference between number 2 in the world versus number 7? And if we start talking about Elo ratings, that's another 30 minutes easily. But when it comes to abstracted progression, again, it's very easy. You can change the UI, make it more fancy. Everybody's favorite, upgrading the little border around your character to make it look more flashier and beautiful. Again, the simple fact of leveling up. You went from level 5, you're level 10, now you're 5 levels better. And progression of this kind, again, as long as it keeps going up, and as long as the player sees it, it can be very alluring, as we've talked about before. Now, with that said, though, there are some key elements of a good progression model, regardless of the genre and the design. Good progression in video games has to be consistent. I need to see at any time where I'm at, where I'm going, and what's my reward for getting there. And like I said, this is where player skill becomes very hard to show. Because when it comes to this, it's very much a pass or fail, black or white. I know at the end of the level there's a boss. I beat the boss, we move on to the next level. And that's it. When it comes to RPGs, though, again, the ubiquitous experience bar has been such a powerful motivator to keep people playing. You have the bar stretch along the bottom of the screen, and you're just almost at the end there. In fact, I should do it this way for a reflection. So you're going to play that little extra bit longer to get the level. But then you level up, and lo and behold, you unlock something new. And then, of course, you have to try that out. But wait, now you're halfway to the next level. Well, I better keep playing. And again, this kind of abstracted progression, because it is easily represented in game, can keep someone going for any number of time. Now, the other point about progression, good progression models, is that the player must always feel like they're making progress. And this is where a lot of video games tend to slip up on. Because as we've said before, many games will try to focus on the long-term progression. As in, it's not about you going from level 2 to 3 to 4, we're thinking level 10, level 20, or just getting to the level cap with the famous, the real game begins there. The problem is, without showing the player or providing the player with that level of progression in the short term, it makes it very hard for them to stay motivated over the long term. I used the example before, but in terms of psychology, it is more motivating to do 10 quests that involve killing 10 enemies, rather than one quest that requires 100 enemies to be killed. Because if the player can see the progress and it's immediate, they know that they are moving forward. And that is the grand lesson for today's critical thought. A good progression model always moves the player forward. They always see themselves going from here to here, or in some cases here, and so on. Even if it's just that little tiny bit of forward momentum, that's enough. The second the player feels like they are stuck, or they are falling back and losing progress, is when the game is over for them. And speaking about being stuck, this is when we run to the limitations of abstracted progression. As I've said, abstracted progression works really well in the short term because you're constantly making progress. And we'll talk more about examples of that in the next minute. But what happens when you get to the end game? When the more meaningful forms of progression have already came and went, and now you're just dealing with simple scaling. This is when games will tend to run out of steam for a lot of players because they've lost that meaningful progression. Diablo 3 is a brilliant example of this. From the level 1 to 70, every level you are unlocking something new, be it a new talent, a new rune, or even just a new skill. But you are charting your growth from beginning to end. Of course, you're getting better gear, you're upgrading, and so on, but you are seeing meaningful progression. But what happens when you get to the end? Diablo 3's endgame is categorized by running greater rifts and, of course, completing sets. But once you've found the set you like and you've completed it, where else do you go from there? And this has been a problem that Blizzard has struggled with since patch 1.04. Because it is so focused on the meaningful progression of set items, once you've completed your set, you're not going to take that off because the set bonuses are just too great. So what's left is to basically try to get ancient variants of those sets or re-rolling the stats as high as you can make it. But the problem is that's not meaningful. This is the challenge, or sort of the two sides of the scale when it comes to progression based on abstraction. Because abstraction is all about raising numbers or making other numbers go down. But the player needs to see that there's something big happening. In the idle genre, for instance, when you're starting out, you are getting new buildings or heroes, or again, whatever the idle version of the game is, you are getting the stuff and the screen is updating. But once you've gotten all that and now you're just watching numbers go up or down, there's nothing left. And this is what happens with Diablo 3. Because once you get to the end, the changes you're going to make are incremental at best. Me doing an extra 300 points of damage doesn't mean much if my damage is in the millions at this point. And because of that, I find by the time I hit like Torment 5 or 6, unless I'm streaming this or going for like a how far can I go, I just burn out on it. Now, with that said though, I want to talk about kind of what led to today's topic, and there's two examples. The first is kind of the difference between the right way and the wrong way. Now, this week, Cook Serve Delicious 2 came out, which if you watch the stream or the recording, you know that I play a bit of. And one of the things that they did between the first and the second one is actually remove and downplayed some of that progression. In the first game, what happened is every time you complete a successful service, you get money. And you can save your money up to buy upgraded equipment or unlock new things. So it could be everything as simple as getting a new restaurant item to maybe getting better trash cans, better toilets, stuff along those lines. The point is, once again, the player sees where they're at. I don't have this upgrade. They see what they have to do. I'm going to keep playing, get the money I need to get this upgrade, and they can see what they're going to get. The upgrade right there. And that, again, pushes you forward. You are always seeing where you're at and where you need to go. In Cook Serve Delicious 2 at the moment, there are no upgrades for that. Instead, progress is done by how many medals you've earned while you're playing. Now, while you are still unlocking stuff, again, it's not as easily understood as saying, there's a goal right over there, go and get it. And as I said, the carrot on the stick is a very popular motivator for any kind of video game. But this is the problem with Cook Serve Delicious 2 at the moment, is that I'm not seeing that immediate benefit. Now again, if I keep playing, I'm going to unlock some stuff and that's great. But without being able to chart my progress, it becomes more or less a grab bag or random. And that's another big point. A good progression model is never randomized. The player should always know what's coming up. And with that said, that takes me to our final example and another major poster child for a good progression model. And those are free-to-play games. Free-to-play, especially the idle and clicker games, whether they're on the PC or on the mobile devices, are some of the most effective progression models I've ever seen in a video game. We've talked about this before, but they're essentially pure progression models divorced from any kind of gameplay. In some cases, there have been those that also have small to medium amounts of game design built in. But the point is, they do a very effective job of always giving you another carrot on the stick to go after. Be it getting more resources, upgrading your heroes, rolling the loot box to see if you can get a 5-star, again, whatever. And as you level up, you unlock more stuff. Maybe at level 10 you unlock PvP mode. Maybe at level 30 you unlock a special slot machine that rolls higher than normal characters. The point is, the player is always given something to shoot for. And it's always spelled out as clean as possible. Hey, do this and you'll get 10 gems, and then take those 10 gems over to the slot machine. Maybe you can roll for a scroll, and then go take the scroll over to the shop, and maybe you'll get a rare weapon. And by always giving the player these goals and things to shoot for, it keeps them invested in it. Because short-term progression is always going to be more alluring than long-term. Like I've said, and again, the key point, if the player doesn't see that they're moving forward, the game is going to become a grind and just very bad or hard for them to continue. But as long as they can see this going forward, they will keep playing and playing and playing for as long as there's still things to shoot for. And this is why the games as a service model has become very popular, because you can add new stuff in. So instead of it being, like I said earlier, with incremental upgrades, let's say in a month from now we add a patch that puts in a brand new tier of gear that's now 5 times higher than what you were at before. Well, that means we have to go back in and start going that way. And then after, let's say in another month, we add another tier. Or maybe we add a brand new quest that uses a new currency that will unlock super exclusive items or characters you can't get anywhere else. And we're about 17 minutes in. I could just keep talking about this probably for an hour or so if you really want to get me started. But to wrap things up, a progression model is a cornerstone of great game design and a vital component of any game meant to be played long term. Whether you're dealing with pure skill, pure abstraction, or some combination of the two. This is the difference between wow, my mouth just dropped there. This is the difference between someone sticking around and playing a game for an hour and getting bored, or coming back daily and playing for 2 to 3 hours and maybe even getting that month or who knows, even a year subscription. And like I said, you can see the difference between a good and bad progression model. And like I said, if you want a good example, study a mobile game. Because even though they can be very intrusive and money hungry, they certainly know how to get people to stick around and play. For those of you watching this, as I said, with microtransactions and free-to-play games being sort of the high-end and easy, I guess the easy fruit to grab off the tree, can you think of games that aren't from the idle, clicker, or free-to-play genre that had really engaging progression models? Whether, again, it's because of its skill, abstraction, or a combination. And I'm going to cut you off right there. Call of Duty doesn't count because I already know that one. So let me know what you think in the comments below. But thank you so much for watching today's Critical Thought. If you're new, be sure to like and subscribe. Check back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. And let me know if you have any topics for me to cover in the future. But until next time, have a great night. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and come back nightly around 10 Eastern for regular game streams. For a collection of my writings as well as weekly podcasts on game design topics, be sure to check out game-wisdom.com. You can follow me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates from me throughout the day. And be sure to check out our Patreon campaign. You can find us on Patreon under GW Bycer for ways to not only support Game Wisdom, but you can get access to our Discord channel where we'll talk game design topics, as well as allow you to vote for our Saturday Night Grab Bag stream. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy the next video here on the Game Wisdom YouTube channel.